Welcome back to the VAXA Bureau Intelligence Optimised podcast, where our Indo-Pacific experts navigate the complexities of safeguarding our present and fortifying our future in these uncertain times. In part one of our discussion with John Cotter from Northwest Phosphate, we unpacked the global phosphate market, Australia's increasing dependency on foreign supply, and the mounting pressure facing our agricultural sector in a volatile world. We heard how Northwest Phosphate, as the last domestic fertiliser miner, is stepping into a vacuum, not only to support food security, but to address a growing national vulnerability. Today in part two, strategy, investment and the national response, we shift focus. We'll examine what it will take strategically, economically and politically to build sovereign resilience in this space. We'll discuss investment challenges, the critical role of infrastructure and energy, and the urgent need for a coordinated national response to secure Australia's fertiliser future. We'll also ask the tough questions. What's holding us back? And how can industry, government, investors work together to ensure Australia can feed itself now and for generations to come? Let's dive in. Yeah. And so, mate, how does Northwest fit into Australia's broader national interest in maintaining, sovereign control over critical inputs like food, water and energy? You just sort of touched on it a bit there.
Yeah, look, we have got that reserve. We've concentrated very heavily on making sure that our water and energy is solved. I cannot control the cost of gas out of the Northern Territory, which is why Incitec Pivot is now struggling to keep their plant online. Now, I would argue that there's a fair bit of corporate work that IPL should have done over the years with that plant. But I guess that sovereign control side of things, we've put up our barriers that, we're going to stay Australian owned, and take some equity from a few of our off takers, but we're not looking to go and list and sell across to the US. We're not miners of the market. And I think that point, Todd, is not so much about the food, water and energy. It's more that the capital flows in Australia do not come back to our base commodities and to our strengths. I think we're still such a young culture. We don't have the depth of wealth that, America has to focus on those things. So we're always looking for, explosive type businesses in critical minerals and things like this. And then ultimately, if you look at the potash market, which is in Western Australia, there was everyone got very excited about that. And there was $1.2 billion spread over 7 ASX companies. And the total market cap for all those companies now is less than 100 million.
Wow.
And so the equity markets get really nervous when those sort of things happen. Whereas my response to that, particularly the, puffer market crowd in the broking houses in Sydney, it's like, hang on, do you want to fund explosive growth, or do you want to fund a business that looks like private equity? It just returns a nice, healthy 20% for the next 50 years. So I think that piece there, Todd, has to be solved. Otherwise, we're just going to, as a miner, you've got to get the capital in to build your stuff, particularly critical minerals, which scares the absolute bejesus out of me. Your money's going to come from China. It's going to come from America and to a lesser extent, the Arab nations. So I think we've got a lot of work to do on that in prosecuting the argument that it's in our national interest that things are investable.
So, mate, how that's a really important point. How do we need a national? Do we need a sovereign fund specifically? For phosphate, given the importance of it. How do we get people to invest in major projects, critical projects like this?
Yeah, it's a good question, Todd. I mean, philosophically, I watched the election announcement around the sovereign fund on critical minerals. And I put on Madeline King's LinkedIn post at the time. I said, look, great. I'm looking forward to the reciprocal investments in metallurgy and R&D and water and power. It's a previous point. And this is the thing, is that if it's going to involve government intervention, it has to be well thought through. And I'm not a believer in government intervention unless there is a proper market failure. So because you end up picking winners, right? And so this is the difficulty I think that policy announcement now had. Um, if there was a sovereign fund, I think it would be back to my earlier point about getting everyone in a room and saying, okay, do you have a reserve? Do you have a JORC statement? Do you have your off takers? Where are you up to? And then it's a risk appointed sort of grant system or convertible to equity, which is a bit of a problem for the feds, but if there is a path to do that, to say, hey, we're going to give you that almost that venture capital kickoff. And there is plenty of precedent in the technology space back when Turnbull was around. But we Australians, we want to go to the next shiny thing. Whereas, you know what? There is a bucket load of people out there that are doing exactly what I'm talking about, just in the coal space, because everyone's turned off on it and they're doing successfully out of it. So I guess my question for government is, we do minerals really well. We do coal really well. Those ones that are hard because of government failure in infrastructure, water power, maybe they're the ones that the sovereign fund could invest in.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And mate, speaking of which, any other messages, for policymakers, who might not realise the strategic importance of domestic phosphate mining?
Look, I think domestic phosphate mining is, I keep going back, it's not a sexy thing, right? We dig it up, we crush it, we wrap some biologic around it with our partners, and we get it into the market. The thing that I sort of want to touch on in terms of those policymakers is that to get to that next level and grow, you need that certainty around water and energy across the north, particularly. And what I've found, Todd, over the last sort of 25 years, is we've slowly anonymized public service. There are some great civil servants in there doing exactly what we need them to do, but we've gotten so scared of talking to each other. You can't get someone's email address easily anymore. You can't look up their phone number anymore. And what happens, and a really good example of this is the Gulf Water Plan in North Queensland. Now, there's some 700 staff in the Department of Water in Queensland, right? If they send one poor young lady up there to negotiate the Gulf Water Plan with some pretty, agitated stakeholders.
Where is up there? Sorry, just for people who are listening.
Sort of Julia Creek, north. So the Gulf Water Plan runs from, Burketown, Normanton, Currumbin, down to Mount Isa and back around to Hewenden. And one of the things that I find fascinating is that we all operate as a community up there, and we have a bit of a dust up, but you talk to each other, right? And particularly with more Indigenous groups. And what I've found now is government is so scared of making a mistake that we talk about consultation, but we don't actually talk to people. And so my big example here, and why I bring up the Gulf Water Plan, is that a lot of the Indigenous groups, I talk to them all the time, and they sort of go, oh, government apparently has carved out, Indigenous water under this plan. What are we going to do with it? How do we make a buck out of it? I'm like, oh, well, yeah, we can trade with this farmer and we can do this and we can do that. So you've almost got government failure in a process that's then leading to further market failure. And I've been trying to work out a way of describing it, but I keep coming back down to you can't consult. You've got to engage. You've actually got to sit around the table and talk to people, but be okay in taking some risk. And Mike Kaiser, the former DG under Anastasia Palaszczuk, he and I could not agree more about this. And that's my message for policymakers is get out there and talk to people. Don't be scared of a stakeholder that might want to have a Barney. That's the whole point, is we need to find a way to have democratic debate again in complex policy.
Yeah, and I think, in this state especially, but even federally, like, it's a bigger procurement integrity and ethical problem. People think that, they're going to be breaking rules by talking to people. Well, how do you get the best outcome without, by talking to people? You can't guess, what people are thinking, and that is part of the problem with communication. People think that they have communicated when they haven't. Yeah. The bureaucrats and the politicians, like you said, mate, they need to get out into the regions, not just rely on what they're reading on TikTok or Snapchat or whatever it is that they listen to. Get out into the regions, talk to people, sniff it up, feel it, get in there.
That's right, Todd. I think if another way to perhaps say it is when process overtakes outcome, you're going to have failure. And to put it back into some of the context of what you do, when the military complex of procurement becomes more influential than the frontline staff of the purpose they serve, then you're going to get management failure. And if you look at every great war loss, it's typically the imbalance of process over outcome.
100%, 100%. And mate, actually, two other things which you've spoken a little bit about today and ties into what you just mentioned there, energy and logistics. They're ongoing pain points. Yeah, how are you navigating the high costs of power in Mount Isa? And again, for those people who don't know where Mount Isa is, for our listeners overseas, look it up. It's in the middle of nowhere. And you've got unpredictability of projects like the Copper String project and the likes. What do you do there to make this a viable project?
So I think the first thing to state is that we in the regions do take emissions, we do take natural resource use very seriously. And the challenge for us there is that you want to then connect into a national energy market, which is what Copper String would provide for us. But it is non-economic infrastructure. And so what's happened over the last sort of 30 or 40 years in policy world is that every project needs to stack up. Everyone would have heard that. The difficulty with that is in a benefit cost ratio, public infrastructure just doesn't stack up. Hospitals are not meant to stack up. And so anything with an asset life over 30 years doesn't work in a financial model. But we try and put it in a system. And what that means is that it's a great tool for treasuries to say no to things, basically. And I get that. That's where they come from. The difficulty with that is that when you map out those, secondary and tertiary economic benefit and, go back to my hub and spoke model of Mount Isa, if you have energy at a reasonable price, and so not reasonable, well, let's for academic purposes say $150 a megawatt, that is actually at a price certainty that would allow those young copper miners to come on and provide that material and they could be feasible about it. But what they've got to do is they've got to jump on a plane and explain to a foreign investor that there could be a project coming on. The Minister for Energy last year has done 2 sod turnings by having a grader, turn up with and a backhoe. It's fluff, right? So people see through that immediately. And I guess we're not addressing the root cause, which is why is this piece of infrastructure there? It's to provide benefit for the next 6 generations, not just this one right in front of us. And so I look at that and I look at, say, the Mount Isa rail line, and the reason that we're heading to the north was Queensland Rail are a commuter rail business. I don't think any of the board members or CEO have ever been to Mount Isa, and I extend the invitation again to them to come up and have a chat to us. But if I was a metallurgical coal miner 400 kilometres from port, I would pay about $1 a tonne. I am 937 kilometres away from Townsville, and I'm paying $140 a tonne, and it's not commodity agnostic. So something is wrong, Todd, in the economic regulatory framework, and it's just not sexy. It doesn't attract votes, but it costs all of us longer in economic terms because we can't get projects on to put revenue in the state of Queensland. So at a point in time, the hard business, the gravity of governing is got to filter down from this new government into the civil service to go, this is just the right thing to do. Now, how do we control our costs? How do we make this work? that's the danger now is that we've gone from flicking it from copper string, we've flicked it from Powerlink onto Queensland Investment Corporation, and it'll go around in circles of people. But I'm sitting here now telling you that you could build Hewenden to Mount Isa for about $2 billion with contingency. But again, we're letting process get in the way of
Oh,
outcomes.
that's crazy, mate. I'm recently in Japan, and I was having a look around, just thinking what they have done. Now, very totally different geographically as well, totally different. But it just feels like we've wasted the last 80 years in this country. And energy is a big part of that. And I'm a firm believer that we need a buffet of energy in Australia, and nuclear needs to form part of that, in my opinion. Especially if we're going to guarantee pricing and delivery of food to plate for people at home. And again, just for people listening as well, how can you just provide a bit of a link between fertilizer production and and what the Australian family grocery basket looks like every week, because prices are going through the roof.
Yeah, well, we import about 4 million tons of urea. Urea is made from coal and petrochemicals. We import about just 1.5 million tons of what's called monoammonium and diammonium phosphate fertilizers. Um, so at, let's call it 700 to $1,000 a ton, fertilizer would be, somewhere between 5 to 10% of every single grocery bill for the 25 and a bit million people that live in this country. So it is something that touches you every day and no one knows about it. And that secondary point I made earlier is the binary nature of when it's not there, that food just doesn't turn up and not in the volume. So imagine the price fluctuations that happen when that comes through. So what worries me, I think at a third line, Todd, is back to that quality control point of view. The moment, so there was a shipment of DAP went into New Zealand recently. There were all sorts of quality control problems with that, and milk was rejected. Was the end goal there? So you've got product wastage, and then you've got price hikes. Those are those are the really big sort of challenges that getting the consumer to understand and follow the bouncing ball. That's a big job.
Yeah, right. And mate, you just mentioned quite a few products there that we import, just to put food on our table every day. So, mate, what happens if Australia's phosphate supply were cut off tomorrow due to geopolitical instability or trade disruption, or the inputs into the phosphate supply?
Well, the Intertech pivot plant, which is essentially the same distance south of Mount Isa as we are north. So it's a MAPDAP plant. So it brings gas in, it makes ammonia, it washes the phosphate rock with sulfuric acid out of the sulfur plant from the Glencore copper mine, and it makes synthetic fertilizer. So that's the MAP and DAP that I was talking about. Um, if those supply chains are cut, Todd, it would be about 24 hours before that plant would be nationalised. And that was essentially what people were starting to talk about when the AdBlue crisis came on, because we'd have no domestic urea production anymore either. So your two largest nutrient imports required for a range of different commodities across Australia, we've got none left. And there's a good chance that Phosphate Hill is going to get shut down. So I would put it in the same way, going back to the COVID example. There's only one large vaccine batch plant left in Australia. It's sitting over in South Brisbane at the Translational Research Institute. These are serious things that I think the good times of our current society have made us not pay attention to.
Yeah.
And to your point about energy, always the lights come on, it's fine. But you and I grew up in a time when brownouts were quite a regular sort of.
They were normal. Yeah, it's crazy. So, I mean, and mate, that's the point, I guess, where the public needs to be invested in this. They need to understand that, like you said, the food doesn't just magically appear in a Woolies and then on your plate. So the public need to work together with industry and government, to support our food and national security objectives. I mean, how can they do that?
Sorry, so you just dropped out there.
Oh, sorry, mate. No problems at all. So, mate, I was just saying that, people, they think that their food just magically appears in Woolies, and they get home and they cook it, and happy days. They don't think really where it comes from, and the inputs that go into it. And that's what's really important. I think the public need to understand, the value and supply chain inputs into where their food comes from, and that they need to work together. At least understand how they can work better with industry and government, to improve and shore up our food and national security objectives. But how can they do that? How can industry, government, and public work together to achieve that goal?
Mm, that's a good point. Um, Look, I think probably going back to my earlier point about being proud of everything the land produces. I think we've got a lot of industry groups in ag, a lot of industry groups in cattle, we've got a lot of industry groups in feedlotting or cropping, cotton. But then we've got coal industry groups, we've got minerals industry groups, we've got critical mineral groups. Um, Probably what would be great if you're David Crisafulli is you have the land conference of Queensland and you have all of us in a room and we're going, you know what, I want to bang up a power line through your property to do this, but in return, I want to put a new road in and probably a bore for your cattle. Oh yeah, well, geez, that's a good idea. Why don't we do that? Oh, and you've got this reserve here. Fostering a bit of an open conversation, and I keep going back to the Texas example. You're a wildcatter for oil, and you're also a farmer. What's wrong with that? We should all be proud of what the land produces because we're all have a vested interest in making sure that we can extract it economically and environmentally right. We put it back for the future for our next generation. But we do it in a way that doesn't cost us millions and millions of dollars in litigation, fighting over who's got rights to what. We should all be there together, working it out together. I think that's it. And I think ultimately, Todd, you could almost call it, solving the revenue problem of Queensland. We do not have enough money coming in the tank. That's our problem. We're spending well beyond our means and bringing us all together and telling the consumer that we're here trying to drop prices down for you by working together. That's the message.
Maybe we all need to be wearing big hats and send a few down to those puffer-wearing traders in Sydney as well, just to get everyone on board. Hey?
Yeah, it's a good idea, mate. I might take you.
So, mate, finally, if everything goes to plan, what does Northwest Phosphate look like in 5 or 10 years' time?
Yeah, look, we'd like to be producing about 1.5 million tons of concentrate across Australia, New Zealand, and Asia, going into sort of critical food markets to produce a range of fertiliser products. Downstream, we have a block of land in Mount Isa that we're building with a rail hub that we would like to produce a high quality phosphoric acid in to create two products. One is what we call a dicalcium phosphate, and you granulate that, and that goes into lick blocks for cattle, and that help the 6 million head of cattle across northern Australia need a lot of phosphorus to keep calves at foot. So we see that as a market to help solve because all that comes in from China currently. The second product we want to make is a high quality phosphoric acid, which is a feedstock to lithium iron phosphate batteries. So within our phosphate rock, when you crack it open and make phosphoric acid, you can create quite a high quality electrolyte for batteries. The byproduct of that is calcium gypsum, and within that is a lot of light and heavy rare earths, many which go into making military applications and heavy magnetic material, particularly in like F-22s and things like that. So that's our 10-year plan, Todd, is to produce those downstream products, but ultimately keeping as many jobs in Mount Isa as we possibly can.
Oh, mate, it's very noble, number one, but it's nation building, it's legacy creating. And he is hoping everyone, not just key decision makers, but mum and dad and the kids at home. He is hoping everyone can get on board. For the future of not only our country but for our region as well, because our partners in the region are looking to us as well. Like you said, we've got big populations on our doorstep. We're all one. We all need to feed each other, and this is really, really important project that goes a long way to doing that, John.
Oh, thank you very much, Todd. Yeah, and like I said, it's been a long time coming, a lot of persistence and determination. But my message to anyone listening is it can be done. Don't let the sheer size of thinking like a pioneer in Queensland daunt you. Get out there and have a crack. There are so many great stories of success in the regions that also, for my urban friends, are some of the most staunch environmentalists you could find. And they have a great ethical framework of doing what is right for our state and what is right for our environment in perfect balance. And just come out and see us, come out and talk to us. And I thank you, Todd, for the opportunity to extend that message further.
No, Johnny Cotter, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate. We'll have to do this again, but look forward to watching the progress of Northwest Phosphate and getting one of those hats.